Hey, good afternoon and welcome to our virtual design review panel meeting. Today on our agenda is 676 King Street West and 4 Breadalbane Street. Our design review panel meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the City of Hamilton's design review panel webpage. In attendance today, we have city staff, our applicant and their consultants, members of the public and media. Please note there's no questions from the public at today's meeting. And then a reminder to our panelists to please keep your microphones muted while not speaking. Thanks everyone for attending the design review panel. David, you may begin when ready. You're muted, David.
Hear me? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. Edward, can you please confirm this session is being recorded?
Yes, we are recording.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
Oh, just that it doesn't, oh yes, Eldon's joined us. So no, there are no changes.
Okay. And I assume there are no conflicts of interest with any of the panelists? And on the agenda today is the review of 676 King Street West and 4 Breadalbane Street. The lead planner in the file is Amna Amir, and she can respond to any planning questions. Emily Bent, heritage planner, is also available for questions on cultural heritage. Edward will make a brief presentation. Edward, can keep your presentation to under 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Okay, yes, today subject property is 676 King Street West and 4 Breadalbane, shown here with the blue rectangle on the northeast corner there. Then, of course, King Street is one way at this point and about four lanes wide. So the development includes an 8-story multiple residence with 72 units, 26 parking spaces, of which 23 are proposed as underground parking spaces and 3 surface parking spaces accessed from a rear laneway. So we have Christ the King Cathedral to the west and predominantly single-family residential to the north. To the south, we have a large commercial property with a grocery store and some restaurants and a drugstore. Then to the east, this is Victoria Park, quite a large public park. This is viewing the property from King Street, looking to the west. That's Christ the King Cathedral in the distance. This is looking back along King Street to the east. The property is right here in the corner. And note we do have the bike lane at this point here. And then across the street is the, I guess, loading area for all the commercial properties. Then looking north along Breadalbane Street from King Street. And then looking back along Breadalbane Street to the south, looking past the site. And then the lower picture showing that rear laneway condition. Here we have our site plan, fairly narrow property, and orienting the building east-west, of course, giving some setback to King Street and some pedestrian frontage, sidewalks, and private entrances to the 3 residential units, and then the larger multiple residential entrance. And then, of course, the ramp down to the parking garage access from Breadalbane Street. From the formal consultation, there was some concerns from staff regarding the building height and impact on the low-density residential, the pedestrian environment. And there was a request to reconsider the height, possibly lowering it. There was also a note that the applicant must demonstrate certain technical requirements, such as sun, shadow, wind, and views. And there was a note that some of the studies were incomplete and needed to be completed in order for staff to support the proposal. Some questions looking for from the panel were: how well does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area? We're looking again at form, scale, character. In terms of the relationship with the existing residential to the north, how could the angular plane be employed to soften the proposed massing? Would translucent balcony panels be appropriate given the proximity to neighbors to the north? 3, how well does the proposed site layout work to support the pedestrian realm and fit within the character of the neighborhood? Number 4, how well do the choices made in regard to the masonry cladding for the building, for the building base help to retain the visual prominence of the existing architectural heritage? And number 5, how well does the proposal provide for a mix of unit sizes and accommodate a range of household sizes and income levels? That is the staff presentation. I'll give back control.
Thanks, Edward. So we'll look to the applicant to make a presentation at this point, and if you could keep your presentation to under 10 minutes, be appreciated.
Absolutely. So good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Gillis, a senior planner with Landwise, and I am the planner on the file. And with me, of course, our Lintac architects, including Rick Lintac and Julie Ritchie. I am just going to share my screen quickly. Confirming everybody can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Edward, for your overview of the site context. In light of the presentation length, I will not repeat where you have covered. So here we're just going through views of the site from various points around the site. Here we're just highlighting the zoning of the site being a transit-oriented corridor mixed-use zoning, which does permit the multiple dwelling use. And of note, at this time, the site plan does comply to most of the zoning, except we will require variances to building height from 22 meters to just over 26 meters, and to permit a greater maximum yard setback from King Street West. And that, as we'll get later into the presentation, is to mitigate the view shed impacts to the Christ the King Cathedral. So just quickly, and then to summarize the planning context of the site is designated in the Urban Hamilton official plan as mixed use medium density, and within the Strathcona secondary plan is also mixed use medium density in the neighborhood node. And in summary, the goal of the policy document is to transition King Street West into a more transit-oriented corridor, promoting a mix of forms and uses to support ridership and convenient access to the various transportation infrastructure investments, including the future LRT. Along with that, in order to permit a height of greater than 6 stories up to a maximum of 10 stories, mitigation should be considered to neighboring properties, including cultural heritage resources. And that would include mitigating through massing, materiality, setbacks, and ensuring sun shadow impacts are mitigated to adjacent private properties and public spaces. And from there, I will pass it over to Rick to just go over quickly the proposed building design and landscape.
Thanks, Caitlin. If you could go to the next slide, please. This slide illustrates the landscape concept. As you can see, the building is set back from King Street, and the landscape treatment is it's sort of emblematic of the neighborhood in front of the cathedral. So the intention was that the feel of the landscape of the cathedral is extended to the front of our building. If you could go to slide 21. Oh, I messed you up. You're going to say something about heritage.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can say that now. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. So, as mentioned, the Strathcona neighborhood, of course, is made up of a number of cultural heritage landscapes and resources. Of note surrounding our property would be the McNabb Survey, which is primarily a low-density residential neighborhood, the Cathedral of Christ the King cultural heritage landscape, and of the building itself as a resource. We have the Toronto Hamilton and Brantford Railway cultural landscape. And then there is a specific property just to the north of us, municipally known as 25 Hunt Street. Although the properties that are subject to this proposal are not listed, they are of interest. So we have researched the history of the site, and so 676 King Street, or sorry, no, 4 Breadalbane is a Patton Motors, which was established in 1930 and has continued as a motor vehicle garage and is still occupied with that use to this day. And on 676 King Street West is the Hardwick and Son Memorial Studio, which was established on the site in 1947. Here, Cathedral of Christ the King, which is quite prominent on the King Street West corridor. And here is a previous picture of its former landscape. And here's pictures of the properties fronting Hunt Street immediately north of the subject lands. And here are the detached garages that front onto the right-of-way that is immediately adjacent to our property to the north. In summary, Megan Hobson, who was unfortunately not able to make it today, did do a historical research and photo documentation and had noted some areas of interest within the existing buildings, which include the Hardwick and Son stone feature here, the details above the windows, and then of course the photo evidence of the Patton Motors. So those have been suggested as interpretive strategies to be incorporated through the detailed design, which the developers are committed to investigating further. And items that we have implemented through our proposal include an adequate setback from the streets to protect views of the cathedral. We're incorporating a landscape strategy that's complementary to the cathedral landscape, and using cladding materials that complement the historic context, which are majorly the red brick, which is found throughout the neighborhood to the north. And Rick, you're back up.
Okay, sorry. Sustainable design, we have a few strategies, electrical vehicle charging above code, bicycle storage, low maintenance landscape, efficient fixtures, white roof, low VOC materials. Next slide. Next slide, these are basically some diagrams illustrating the existing buildings and the evolution of the massing. So we go from a rather short, squat footprint or building envelope, which is permissible, to something which is a little higher but thinner, giving way view shed to the cathedral, and articulated quite a bit of attention paid to the side elevations, which are actually quite prominent when you arrive, when you when you view the building from the street. Number 24. Edward talked a little bit about the site plan, so I won't go through that. If we can go to number 31. 31 is the rooftop. So you can see that it's the half level with the full half level with the terracing back to the south with landscape terraces. And number 32, that's the cross section of the building, which indicates the building height, the underground parking, which is recessed to provide a good planting bed for plant material fronting onto King Street, and the terracing at the back. Number 33, please. The front elevation, which shows a mixture of the red brick of the neighborhood, the stone, which is evident at the cathedral, and sort of fashioned in a bit of a buttress kind of massing in homage to the cathedral. The stucco, which is kind of a neutral element, and then the glass, which lightens which is a lighter material in contrast to the other materials. Sorry, number 35. These are the side elevations, which are, as you can see, the one on the right-hand side is the view that you get when you approach the building from the right, and it has a vertical orientation, and it complements the tower of the cathedral. I'm just going to go quickly to, do you want to, sorry, Caitlin, the VIA?
Yeah,
Visual
so
impact
here we
assessment.
can move into the visual impact. So here is a georeferenced proportion of the building's massing in the site context. Here is looking northwest, and then here is from the street view along King Street. So here would be the northwest corner of Victoria Park, looking down the King Street viewshed. And as you can see here, there is the Esso gas station signage here with our building kind of tucked in behind. And the cathedral is still quite prominent on the curve of King Street. Here is moving a little bit closer. This is the corner of Dundurn at King Street. And again, the building with use of setback is behind the viewshed of the basilica, which to protect that view. Here is a view from interior of the neighborhood. So this is Hunt Street at Breadalbane. So of course you can still see the escarpment when you're looking south. And we feel that the building meshes well with the residential context interior to the neighborhood and within the King Street corridor. Here is looking east on the east side of, well, more so in front of the cathedral. And here again, we feel that the building's not overpowering or taking away from the view of the cathedral. Rick, would you like to go into the sun shadow? You might be muted.
Yeah, sorry, if you can just go to briefly scan through those. Slide showing the as of right and the proposal. The conclusion is that we do have some shadowing of the 8 properties directly to the north of us. However, that shadowing is no different based upon our envelope than what would be permitted as of right with the existing zoning. There are no shadow impacts on any public common amenity areas, and we are away from the downtown core, so there are no concerns with respect to that. So I think that kind of wraps up our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel members to ask questions, and number 1 is Eldon.
Thank you for the presentation. I did have an opportunity to speak with my colleagues in advance of this call, so my questions are going to be probably all over the place. So I'm If you could help me understand the 8 to 9 meter setback along King Street, is that driven by the visual impact assessment, or is that driven by a desire to try and replicate kind of an open space experience similar to the basilica or cathedral? Sorry.
I'm happy to start answering that. So the property itself has a little bit of an odd irregular shape along the King Street West frontage. There is a bit of a jog that happens. So in order to provide the building with an appropriate massing, but then also the underground parking to be functional, the building has been placed where it is, but also to your point, it was majorly driven by ensuring that we weren't impacting the view shed of the cathedral along King Street. And then we took that as an opportunity to really build up the landscape scheme to really create this green linear corridor to align with the cathedral landscape.
And I guess separate but related to that, you noted in your urban design brief that there's mitigation in terms of the penetration of the angular plane. So if you could explain what that mitigation is.
So from King Street West, we are within the angular plane using the 80% of the right-of-way width. So I'm going to take it from the rear of the property from the outside edge of the right-of-way.
Perhaps you could pull up that diagram.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. I think it's in your urban design brief.
Yes, it is. So here, again, the King Street right-of-way using 80% of that width, we're within that without stepbacks. And then here we have used the as of right 11-meter building height that would be permitted on the properties, the residential properties. And here, of course, we do start encroaching at the 6th story, and then we step back at the 7th, and then the half story at the 8th level is outside of that angular plane. And the mitigation strategies that we have used is we have changed the materials at that point to kind of set them back in visual plane. And then at the higher stories in the mechanical penthouse, we've used more of a translucent glass to help kind of set that back from the viewpoint when standing in a rear yard. And then also keeping in mind that they do have detached garages in their rear yards. That does take up quite a bit of their rear yards in addition to deeper rear yards. So we're about 25 meters from the back of our building face to the back of a residential dwelling fronting Hunt Street.
And sorry, just for clarity, the angular plane taken from the rear, is that based off the city's guidelines, or is that based off of best practice that you found? Or I'm not sure what those dimensions are. It's hard to read.
Rick, do you want to jump in on the as of right angular plane?
Yeah, they are. Can you zoom in there a little bit?
The numbers do get a little blurred. So this is 11 meters here.
I have to say I'm a little confused. I'm going to ask a supplementary question. Sorry, Eldon, because it's on the same topic. My read of your urban design wasn't that you were setting it from the other property, but rather that you felt you had an as of right building that went right to the property line that could be 6 stories high. And that's why the line is set where it is.
That is correct. So for zoning, we are permitted up to 22 meters without stepping back our building. Official plan policies do require, if we want to move past 6 stories, to mitigate impacts up to 10 stories. And so we have pushed the 6-story envelope up to 7.5 stories. And through that, we have changed materiality and stepped the building back. In order to step the building back sooner, we would kind of come into this condition of single loaded corridors likely, which would become a challenge on the building design and actual implementation of the development.
And then the 6.19 meter setback from the, I guess, the northerly property line, that's the as of right?
Sorry, the 6 point,
That's a laneway.
That's a laneway.
yes,
Okay. Understood. Okay.
yes.
Okay. On the shadow study, you noted that it's not significantly different from as of right. Did you look at the as of right and compare with what you're proposing? Did you do that exercise?
Rick and Julie had completed that, and that's up on the screen now. So just as a I'm just going to bring us back, sorry, to the massing illustrations. So here was where Rick and Julie looked at the site and looked at what was permitted as of right, and then they started articulating and stepping back. And then this building is what is reflected in this as of right shadow study.
So this is the building that we're seeing in the shadow study is the as of right. It's not the actual.
And then it
Proposal.
moves into the proposed. So
Oh,
there's
I
two
see.
fun shadow,
Okay.
yes.
I see. I think I missed that. I apologize. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alden.
So Jennifer Sisson.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentations, Edward, Caitlin, and Rick. I appreciate it. I had a couple of questions. First of which was, I was wondering if you considered retail or commercial uses when you were putting this together.
There has been consideration of it, and it continues to be a consideration. The site does have its challenges in terms of traffic and connectivity to the rest of the retail function of the corridor and the plaza. So at this time, we've tried to activate that grade level plane with the grade related apartment units that would be accessed from King, and then using that corner where much of the glazing is as common amenity.
Thank you. That leads into another question. I noted the townhomes that you've shown, they're separated from the grade level a little more than I'm used to seeing. Usually we see maybe 3-4 stairs, and I think you've got 6 to 10 or more. Can you explain what was driving that grade change?
Rick, do you mind taking that one?
Yeah, it's a very complicated site. It kind of slopes down in two directions. By the time you take into account the ramp down to the parking garage, and it's just the cross section, just the way the whole dynamics of the site worked. That's where they ended up.
Okay, sorry, I understand that as like the building design was kind of driving the heights there.
Yeah.
Building and parking. Okay, thank you. And then my last question was about the amenity spaces, and just if known, I know you may not have got this level of detail kind of figured out yet, but if you have an idea of what the intent is, both for the ground floor indoor amenity space and the 8th floor outdoor amenity space, if you know what the kind of the program was intended to be for those areas.
Truthfully, we have not gotten into those details, but we're happy to take any suggestions you may have and what have worked in the examples that you've seen.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David, and thanks for your presentation. I have a couple quick questions for the city and then a question for the design team. We were posed with a list of questions in the city's presentation, and is the city now satisfied that all of those requirements have been provided? And is the city satisfied with the strategy on the angular plane calculation? We know it pokes up above that line, but is that are we looking at that angular plane strategy that meets your expectations? It's a question for Edward, I guess. Yeah.
My
Oh,
name is
thank you.
Amna, and I'm the planner on the file. I will defer it to urban design staff.
Yes, thanks, Jennifer, for the question. I think the angular plane is demonstrated. There is some clipping. I would like to say that they've done what they can, given the depth of this property is quite shallow.
Yeah.
With regards to the studies and documents, I'm not sure what if the documents submitted for the design review panel are updated from the original submission. So I think we'd have to go back and look at those.
Yeah. Yeah. It was mostly the angular plane question that I didn't feel we were equipped to answer if that strategy was acceptable or not to you. But
Yeah, it's
we can move
a
that into
sticky
comments.
one.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm prepared to give an answer
that's
right
fine.
now.
That's
I'm sure
fine.
you can appreciate we have to balance the concern
Absolutely.
from the community, like with obviously there's some practical realities
Yeah.
about having a single loaded corridor.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that there was some mitigation and some design cues that were employed to respect the angular plane.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can't believe
Sorry.
I'm going to do this again, but I do
Go ahead.
have the same question. I just want clarification because in some ways, how they've solved their building isn't the question in my mind. The question is, have they interpreted the position on their drawing where that angular plane, are they calculating the angular plane location correctly by extrapolating from the 6-story position? Is that an acceptable interpretation of the zoning requirements? Regardless of whether their building actually pokes above it or not, we want to know if that line is how it should be calculated and that they're poking a bit, or should it be measured as it was suggested in the commentary from the city from the rear property line up would be, fairly drastic
Yeah.
extent above the line. So there's that interpretation clarification that I'm hoping to
Yeah.
hear.
Now, am I correct in thinking that because it's King Street, this is a talk zone and they are permitted to start the angular plane at 11 meters?
I believe the TOC1 zoning, there's no requirements. So
if I may, I think there's two interpretations being looked for: zoning, which is requiring our setback, and the building stepbacks from property lines when abutting a residential lot or use. And then the second question is where that angular plane is taken from. I will defer to staff and for complete confirmation of where that measurement was to be taken. But I do know that in a lot of standard practice and the angular plane starts at grade on that property boundary. And if that approach is taken on the site, it basically cuts our property because of the depth to maybe a single detached dwelling height, if we were going to keep within completely that 45-degree angular plane. And again, then would not achieve that transit-oriented form that the city has visioned for this corridor.
Yep.
And respectfully, a lot of the properties on this corridor are the same depth, if not more shallow. There's very few properties along these corridors that have a significant depth.
Okay, one more related question, and sorry if this was given to me and I didn't note it. Is there any rear setback required? You've got a 0 lot line at the back.
Yeah,
So you're looking for a variance there as well.
So the site certainly has a number of technicalities, including on the zoning. So the TOC1 zoning does have a rear yard setback, but it also has street line setbacks. So we have two street lines, Breadalbane and King. And because of these odd jogs in the property, which I will share my screen, we have a zoning interpretation from the city that this is the front lot line, this short piece here, because technically that's the shortest along the municipal right of way, making this a rear lot line
Okay.
on Breadalbane, but it's also a street line. And the street line takes precedent over our rear. So this is our, this is a side.
I see.
Everything's a side except this is a front and this is a rear.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And my next question may be easier to answer.
Yes.
On the amenity level, that's up, what is that, level 6? You've got two types of amenity. One is common and one is private. What is the difference there?
I don't know if, Rick, you kind of want to start this discussion? You might have had more.
That's something that the owners requested. And I guess it has to do with, the intent was there will be one half which would be strictly for the use of the residents. And the other one would be sort of more of a common kind of thing. So, and I'm not really quite sure exactly how they intend to operate. How
But
they intend
both
to operate it,
contribute
but
to your amenity area requirement.
that's true, yeah.
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 Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Dana.
My question is on the amenity area requirement. Is there a requirement for indoor amenity and outdoor amenity, or is it just one requirement for amenity? And do you meet that or exceed that?
So there is a amenity requirement. It can be provided as private amenity or common. It gets calculated in the same area. We are meeting, I believe, exceeding the amenity requirement. So it is 4 square meters per unit less than 50 square meters, and then 6 square meters per unit greater than 50 square meters. Most, if not all, of the units will have private balconies. And then that will be in addition to the rooftop amenity we just discussed and the ground floor interior amenity as well.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, thank you.
Joey.
Thanks, David. Most of my questions were answered regarding the angular plane line, and I agree it's a bit odd that the starting of the angular plane is high up in the air, and I don't think that's the right study for the rear of the building. I do think the right study is, and as design professionals, this is how we would assess whether or not the building at the rear stepped back enough, or if the building in general is too tall. It would be a simple contextual site section through the road, through the building, and through the houses in behind. I think that's the only way to properly address this issue of building height, building massing, proper step backs, and we don't see that drawing here unless it's available. I'd really like to see that drawing.
I don't believe Wintac's office prepared that. I'll let him confirm.
Yeah, we did not do that specifically, but that's possible to do. The modeling is all done in SketchUp, so
Okay.
it would be possible to just cut a cross section from the back of the building all the way to the adjacent street to see how that all works. So
Okay. Because
that's a fairly easy exercise.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a concern that city staff had raised, and we'd like to kind of have that discussion as well, but we're not. I don't think we're able to without that piece of information.
Okay.
Could we look at the site section with the angular plane lines?
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to pull up the. Okay.
So with the property line, we see the property line. How close is assuming a 2-story house to the left of this property line.
Mhm.
Is it 5 feet away, or is there a backyard? Like where is it exactly?
Let me pull up.
Quite a ways. They're big lots in there.
The big
Yeah,
lot?
so
Okay.
I apologize, the image quality isn't great. They're detached garages are right at the property lines.
Okay. Okay.
And then they have quite a deep green
Okay.
amenity area, and then the backs of the dwellings are about here.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
That's helpful. Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
I feel like I already had my questions in somebody else's section, so I'm gonna move on for everybody to have comments. So I'll turn it over to Eldon first.
So thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I got to be honest with you, I struggled. I actually think that this is a overall a pretty good proposal in a location where it's a bit of a gateway location when you think about coming into Hamilton, and I'm acknowledging the efforts that you made as it relates to trying to create more breathing room at the front of the site, and providing kind of more of a landscape that's more in keeping with the character of the place of worship to the west. Um, I I struggled with the angular plane, but when I had a closer look at your shadow study comparison, um, true to point, the as of right versus what you're proposing is not significantly different. Um, so, on that sense, there is a like relationship. If you just went in for a site plan and sought no variances, you would have the same type of relationship. What I would suggest is, even though you had that as of right, that 7th and 8th story does seem to be, um, that's the bonus. And um, even though you're stepping back with what would represent a 45-degree angular plane, at least from that top edge, it's still 45 degrees pitched up in the sky. And you may want to consider having that both 7th and 8th floor as a single loaded relationship to give more breathing room and transition, something to consider. Because it is, even when you look at your visual impacts, it is a significant uptick in height and transition and relationship. But I acknowledge that your as of right would allow you to do up to 6 stories. So I do want to compliment you. I thought the deployment of your building was quite attractive, and I think it would be a very great addition for this corner. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Jennifer Sisson?
Thanks, David. So I think I agree with Eldon. I do think this is a good proposal and in a gateway location. So I do have some suggestions for improvements for the public realm and landscape for your consideration. I really appreciate the setback of the building to maintain the view shed to the cathedral. I think that's really important, and I appreciate that you've made that move. I think it also creates a really good opportunity for having amenity in the front yard, what I'm going to call the front yard, facing King Street, that's really could be a little bit more well buffered from the street and could be more of an opportunity to have space for residents or even a small cafe or retail space here. And while I do like the use of the townhomes as an active use at grade, I'd encourage you to kind of take another look, explore if they could be lowered at all to benefit more from the vegetation screening and have more of that relationship to grade to keep that as an active use. While on the topic of active uses, I've already mentioned kind of a small cafe or retail space. I know you'd mentioned you have kind of looked at this and maybe didn't determine it to be feasible at this point, but I always do like to encourage incorporating even small retail or flexible spaces that it could accommodate small retail in the future as a support and a benefit really to the new residents that would be going in this development, and also the residential area to the north. In terms of the landscape plan, I think there's really a lot of variety in the species that were proposed here, and I'm always happy to see this level of detail in a planting plan. But I would also have appreciated the same level of consideration for the programming and the outdoor amenity space on the ground floor. So for example, you could have maybe consider providing some additional seating, some additional planting and buffer from the roadway. You might consider additional retail uses, and that may allow some spill out patio spaces here. There's an opportunity to buffer the transformer in the yard as well with plantings, and to create that really nice kind of a lush landscape reflective of the cathedral yards, just building on what is there already and all of that lovely natural heritage. I also see an opportunity for you to do something in the paving space that's kind of indicated at that northeast corner of the property. This side of the building could, you could introduce something like a dog run or some other programmatic elements that would benefit residents, while also helping to provide some passive surveillance on your alley, your right-of-way to the north. On that right-of-way, I have some concern with the surface parking spaces in the back, given that the space is meant for occasional use and it doesn't have any passive surveillance. I could see that being a bit of a safety concern, so some thoughtfulness will need to go into the design of that. I unfortunately don't have suggestions for that one for you other than potentially lighting or surveillance needed. I do think also having the ramp beside the right-of-way, while I understand we're in a constrained site, so there may not be a better arrangement for this, but having it there makes for a pretty expansive hardscape and a little bit of an area for pedestrian conflict along kind of the western border of the site. So if you're doing any rework in the area, I'd consider looking at that ramp as well to see if there's another way to kind of minimize the areas where you have vehicles and pedestrian crossings. I did have concerns about not meeting the angular plane and shadow impacts, but as Eldon has mentioned, it seems like this was kind of within your as of right shadow, so I'm not really going to comment on that. And overall, I did want to say I think this is a lovely proposal, and I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more detail. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jen.
Joey?
Am I next? Okay, I'll go next.
Sorry,
Uh,
Jennifer Mallard, sorry. Too
I
many
don't
Jen.
mind going next.
It's okay, I made my mistake.
I'm unmuted. Is that okay, Jennifer? Oh, now you're
So
unmuted.
sure.
Go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead.
unmuted now. I think
Go
Dana
ahead.
was expecting to go next, but anyway, we're all going to go. So I'll go. I agree with Jen's comment about appreciating the setback on King Street and the continuation of that lush sort of landscape along the street edge that pulling out from the lushness around the cathedral. So I think that'll be a great improvement to that stretch of King Street, which needs that right there right now. I mean, the heritage photos make it look like a lively happening place, and it's not that now. It's you know, it's like getting onto the highway there. So I think this will be an improvement to that little pocket of the neighborhood. So that setback off King is a good thing, and increased setback off King. And I think that has to be considered in balance to the relaxations on the rear of the site, the zero lot line and the angular plane calculation. And given that, as Jen just said, satisfaction with the shadow studies and the deep lots and the separation to the houses, I think is fine. So I'm fine with the way that the angular plane was calculated as well. I do support the density in this location. I think it makes sense there. So I don't have a concern with 8 stories as long as it's carefully and sensitively done. It doesn't impede the view corridor to the cathedral, so I think that's a good thing. On the topic of design, I think I appreciate the effort to break down the massing and echo a little bit of the strategy on the cathedral, the buttressing and the sort of verticality of the expression. I think it's a little too broken up, and on the King Street facade, the design logic is there. It's quite symmetrical, but I think on the side elevations, it's just a little bit too broken up, the massing, and could use a little bit more rigor and like evident logic. And it might be simply reducing the material palette, because I think there's 4 major materials there, and maybe just looking at making it a little bit quieter, I think I would appreciate. There are some rounded balconies, and they seem a little bit foreign because the proposal is quite rectilinear, and the rounded edge seems either that it needs more design support to understand why it's there, or they should be rectilinear. Those are all my comments. Who wants to go next?
Dana.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I agree with a lot of what my colleagues said. And in fact, I think there's been many interesting points that have been made, including that of staff around the building height and the angular plane. So I'm going to offer an alternative solution that I think you guys could look at. Eldon mentioned that, the angular plane doesn't do what it's intended for the shadows. And I would think, given that you have an 8-story with only 5 units, single loaded corridor, consider maybe reducing the building height down to 7 stories, not applying for a variance, adding some of those units into the main floor, ground floor amenity space. So you have ground floor residential, the reduced building height, perhaps have no step backs or fewer step backs to kind of make up for that unit space, and then really focusing some of your amenity space on the ground floor along King Street, like like Jennifer had mentioned, along King, and then really kind of amplifying that as part of the outdoor amenity space as well as indoor amenity space. So if angular plane's not really serving you in terms of what you're looking to achieve, maybe there's another option with respect to the design, and maybe it's a reduced building height that looks at achieving that. Single loaded corridors with only 5 units on 1 story seems to be a little bit inefficient. And I know from a sustainability perspective, step backs can also be as well. So maybe looking at an alternative could serve you. I'm not saying this is the right option. I'm just saying it's something that I think you could explore going forward. And lastly, I really do agree with Jennifer Mallard's comment around the west elevation. She put it more eloquently, but I think it just looks too cluttered, or there's just too much going on. And I think some more simplicity and refinement to that design would really serve that corner well at grade. But as you move up the building. My last comments just around parking, underground bike parking, or I'm not sure if it's underground or at grade bike parking, just making sure there's really good connection to the elevator. I believe that the bike parking doesn't have a great connection with the elevator, with the egress. So just making sure as you do move on to detailed design that that's considered. Everything, and that's all for my comments.
Joey.
Thanks, David. And thank you for the presentation, everyone. I think this project as a concept or schematic design is a good one, and it also sets precedent. There isn't another building in this area that is of this height or even of this mass. So I think we have to understand that this building may set the sort of pace for others to come. And I think what it does well is it doesn't disrupt or impact the view corridor to the church. The other pieces I'm not quite sure of yet. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of development that needs to happen with the scheme. I wish we had seen this project much later in its development. because we can't, I'm going to have to rely on others to weigh in on this. And one of those people is a heritage consultant, Megan. I do agree with her recommendations in the HIA, and I also recommend you move forward with her additional mitigation measures, which is the salvaging of some of the heritage attributes, the stone blocks and the window lintel, and also that there is an interpretive feature, whether it's in the lobby or in the landscape or somewhere on the property, that commemorates the prior historic or heritage value of the property. Also, this is a bit different. We are always presented with key questions, and typically those key questions are very straightforward. But in this case, the key questions have come with recommendations, and I suspect it's also because of the kind of level of development of the project at this point. So I'm going to have to, I will rely on staff and their recommendations. Their concern is, as I was, but wasn't able to assess it fully, that the separation distance between the single family dwellings and the proposed buildings are approximately 23 to 25 meters, which staff find is reasonable from the point of view of privacy, and they recommend further mitigation with translucent balcony panels. And also from the point of view of height massing fit with the residential neighborhood, a lower step back at the 4th or 5th stories at the back would be preferable for creating a smoother transition in height. The straight rise to 6 stories is quite drastic. So I will align with these recommendations, and as there is quite a bit more development that needs to occur with this project, I hope to see these recommendations taken on throughout the design process. Thank you.
I guess the comments, for the most part, in line with my colleagues. I find that the 8th story is not unreasonable along the King Street corridor, and in fact, I think is something that should be encouraged in the process of densification. The challenge is the narrowness of the lot, and also the commendable decision actually to set the building back from King Street is obviously compromised the further compromised what is a narrow lot and cause some of these daylight or this view angle, whatever you call it, that we were trying to figure out how it was supposed to be calculated. So I'm sympathetic to the design and the fact that you're poking through that angle as a result of other decisions that benefit the greater community, in particular the attitude towards the view corridor to the Cathedral Tower. There are some other aspects in a nuanced way that I'm not as convinced about. And I guess part of it is the grade related relationship there. I think that some of the commentary that you've had about maybe re-examining the landscape strategy in the forecourt there, and maybe making a more convincing, or either bringing the richness of the landscape in front of the cathedral a little more convincingly through there, I think, or just basically creating a more convincing buffer between, which is really kind of a pretty hardcore arterial that you're adjacent to, and trying to use that landscape in a more a way that we can really understand how you're creating some screening for if you are going residential there. In terms of the articulation of the mass and the architectural development of it, I am a little more under-convinced, as a few of my colleagues have also said, in terms of the material allocations and some of the complexity of the presentation, and to be honest with you, I do have a comment about the presentation. I'm not as enamored with the completeness of it as maybe some of the others have said. I find that even your elevations don't see some of the perspectives or whatever. They seem to not have the ground plane appropriately indicated. So in some ways, you're not helping your argument in terms of the the look of the building. I think a slightly more complete rendering and some more on the context drawings, as Joey was suggesting, would be helpful. But that aside, I'm not convinced, I guess, that this is as successful a pursuit. I think that simplification, maybe a more material application rethink might be appropriate, and the facade maybe that does face to the north, maybe a little bit more complexity of stepping, maybe that does actually go down a little lower, would be helpful. I'm not as enamored with the buttresses at the ground and whether they seem to be very stuck on element and not as convincingly integrated into the like it just seems like there's a little too much of a pastiche of stuff here. And I think I know that we've seen you come forward many times in the past with quite elegant solutions, Rick, and so I just would ask you to take another run at that part of this one, I guess. Anyway, I don't have anything else to add. I don't know if you have any questions for us.
I don't, but I would like to thank you all for your time, and I think this has been very constructive, and we'll certainly take it back and get more detail on the design. Rick, do you have any questions?
Todd's comments are very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. That was really interesting conversations and lots of good discussion and suggestions. Thank you, everyone, for attending this design review panel. We'll close off here, and we'll see the panel members back shortly at 3:30 for our third meeting. Thank you.
Thanks again,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.